Welcome back to Secret Weapons, and today we're taking a look at the Ox Stomp by Universal Audio. As somebody who has been a massive user and proponent of direct recording for a long time now, it is no surprise that I'm a huge fan of the Universal Audio Ox Box. This load box amp topper that enables silent direct recording with absolutely phenomenal UI workflow was just tailor-made to suit somebody like me. The ability to kind of grab great high-quality tube amps and pair them with really killer cabinet emulation, mic emulation, and some incredible built-in effects just kind of all spoke to me in a way that like IR menu diving never ever does. And it sounds so good that I found myself trying to make it work in contexts where the aux isn't the right solution. The workflow of the aux, the iPad graphical interface, the whole thing was just so perfect for me that I wanted it for everything. In fact, I've loved that workflow so much that I found myself trying to shoehorn in the aux in places where it wasn't necessarily the right tool for the job. A great example of that would be big 15 plus watt tube amps sound like magic through the aux. But I have a variety of 1 to 5 watt amps here in the studio that they just don't drive the aux correctly. They're just too low wattage, in my opinion, to really fill that virtual room, so to speak. And so often, because those things don't require a load in the first place, and they do have a line output on the back, I was running them to directly to my DAW and pulling up IRs, or running it into some other line level speaker sim. There was always kind of a stopgap that wasn't quite as good as what I wanted out of something like the Ox's workflow. But fellow aux fans, rejoice, because today we are taking a look at the Universal Audio Ox Stomp, a pedal format aux box. And there are some caveats here. One, obviously it is a pedal format. There is no load inside of this thing. You cannot plug your real tube amp. You can't take your 4, 8, or 16 ohm speaker out on the back and plug it into this. Don't do that. You'll destroy everything. But for all of your line out, line level amp style devices, this thing is a godsend. So let's talk about it. The Ox Stomp does effectively all the same things that the aux does, save for that load box. Remember that. You have stereo outputs, and this you actually have stereo inputs as well, which is really, really handy. You still have all of the kind of mic and cabinet choices, the built-in effects, your digital delay, that precision delay, your pure plate stereo reverb that still sounds amazing, that 1176, the EQ on microphones, as well as the master EQ as well. You still have access to 2 different on-cone mic options, as well as a room mic. You can kind of pick between room mics, pick between any kind of combination of 2 on-cabinet microphones as well, set their levels, set them with their individual EQs as well. You seriously have kind of like the whole suite from the Aux ported into a board-friendly solution. And the beauty of being able to take that entire workflow of the Aux and port it into a board-friendly stereo line or instrument level in device is it solves for a bunch of other problems in the same way that the Aux did for the tube amp problem. And it is to say this: you have things like a valve preamp pedal on your board, or a solid state amp in a box pedal on your board can now not just be flavor for an amplifier or character driving a really flat profile clean pedal platform, but instead you can now use those as the preamp to this thing's cabinets. Like, you can basically build little hyper realistic sounding, incredibly high quality direct rigs without having to bring in an IR loader, or without having to use some sort of super flat pedal friendly amp platform. You now have just great sounding cabinets with all that great universal audio cabinet technology for things like your valve preamps, your solid state preamps, and those little kind of like lunchboxy heads, those ones that have a like line output on the back and don't need to drive a speaker in order to operate. But you can even take it a little bit further, and we'll get into that in a second. So let's start talking through some specific use cases as we walk down my kind of like main applications for something like the universal audio Ox Stomp. And like I said, number one is going to be the ability to take a valve preamp pedal and give it cabinets. I am obsessed with this thing right here. This is the Victory Sheriff V4 valve preamp. And this is a kind of tube pre modeled after a very plexi style amplifier that in order to make sound good, you have to run into cabinets or some other amplifier. But if I want that plexi sound, I need to pick an either crazy flat sounding amplifier, or I need to use something that can really do the IR thing effectively, which means I found myself very frequently using this in conjunction with something like the Quad Cortex, which ends up being a really big and crazy pedal board, especially if I'm still trying to make use of other kind of overdrives, delays, and reverbs along the way. That's a really, really big ask, both in terms of power for the board, but also in terms of board real estate. But instead of having to build out this giant rig for something like this, I can take this and the Ox Stomp and basically spin up a great sounding 4x12 cabinet, whatever mics I want, which again is way better than having to kind of pick your favorite IRs from a terrible IR manager on your computer or whatever. And you just have a full wall of plexi on your pedal board now. Let's hear how that sounds. thing about the cabinets and the tech in the Ox Stomp and kind of the universal audio cabinet tech in general is it sounds phenomenal. Between the 1176 compressor, the master EQ, and being able to blend between hyper realistic sounding cabinet and mic combinations, you can breathe a lot of life and air and movement into any rig that needs some sort of direct in cabinet solution. And so you don't even need real tubes like we just listened to. This is the Copper, also by Victory. This video is not sub-sponsored by Victory, by the way. These are just two really great sounding pieces of gear that touch on very specific and familiar amp styles. The Copper pedal right here is basically a solid state amp in a box style AC30 pedal. And you can take something like this and run it into an amplifier and get an approximation of an AC30 filtered through something else. Or you can take something like this, plug it into the Ox Stomp, and once again, now we're not even driving tubes. We're not even having to pull out a single 12 volt power source. This is 9 volts to the Ox Stomp's 9 volts, and you're done. You have a direct in, solid state, but killer sounding, pedal friendly AC30 rig. Let's hear how it sounds. Now you may be noticing along the way that we are not showing any delays or reverbs in this video, despite the fact that you've been hearing delays and reverbs, including on that intro song. And here's the part where I have to tip my hand and say, we're not using any extra effects on anything for this video. That intro song, all the delay, all the reverb, all of that, all came from the Ox Stomp by itself. That's it. We weren't using any other delays, any other reverbs, just the precision delay and the pure plate reverb inside of the Ox Stomp itself as set up and controlled by the iOS app that it comes with. So we are now going to take a listen to my Benson Vinny, which is a 1 watt tube amp. On the back, you have your 8 ohm out speaker or a line level direct out, and that line level direct out can be used by itself. You don't need a load box for this particular amplifier. And so let's plug into this, plug it into the Stomp, and listen through some of the wet effects, the precision delay, the pure plate reverb, and that precision delay as a chorus and flanging modulation device. Let's talk about some real-world practical use cases for the Ox Stomp. There are a lot of amazing amplifiers out there that are not these 1 to 5 watt single-ended amplifiers that still have a line output on them. The amp I keep in the studio right now that is the best sounding amp I have ever recorded with here in my studio is the Matchless Lightning. And it is a 15 watt all tube combo with a line output on the back. You still have to run that cabinet or some sort of load box, but you do have a line level output available to you in that thing. A great use case for the aux for a live context is, say you are in an environment where you could put a 57 in front of your amplifier, but your front of house guy would rather have a direct signal. You can use that amplifier for stage volume while also running that line out to the aux, and then grab 2 different microphones in the aux software, pan them hard left and right, and send those to front of house. Now, front of house has perfectly in phase 2 different microphones that they can blend with themselves, while you still have the stage volume of the amplifier. Let's hear how a bigger, louder amplifier like the Matchless Lightning 15 sounds with the Ox Stomp. And the beauty of that is you also don't have to use it dry like we just heard it. If you're in a in-ears environment, you could put those pure plate and precision delay effects into your Ox Stomp, and in your wedge in front of you or in your in-ears, you could actually make use of those effects post your amplifier with no added hardware, no rack gear necessary. Let's take this idea one step further. Let's use that Matchless Lightning, and then you can either mic it up, or in my case here in the studio, use my actual aux that's sitting behind me for a dry send, using that speaker out on the back of the Matchless, while also making use of that direct line out on the back of the amplifier to our Ox Stomp, set incredibly wet with our precision delay and our pure plate reverb, effectively giving us a wet, dry, wet rig. Three channels being sent, 1 dry channel, 2 stereo wet channels, all off of 1 amplifier. Let's hear how that sounds. you've been following this channel for a while, you've seen the evolution of my use with things like that Sheriff preamp, my kind of growth over a long period of time, making use of amp in a box pedals with cab sims, IR loaders, creating hybrid rigs with the quad cortex, direct in recording, and all these other solutions to try and approximate what is so much easier done with software like that contained in the Universal Audio Aux box. The Stomp is a great distillation of a lot of what I need for a lot of these direct rigs, especially these non-tube rigs that I make use of. And I am such a big fan of what it does. It is not an all-in-one solution in the same way that the Aux itself was not an all-in-one solution. But for those of you who are using those low wattage single-ended amplifiers, or who live and die on their kind of like board-friendly amp solutions, this thing is absolutely worth your time. And I hope you found this video helpful. I'll see you next time.